Welcome, everyone, to Defending Our Children. We are on today with Kayleigh Kozak. She is instrumental in bringing about Kayleighs law, and it defends the victims of sexual assault, and it was sorely needed. And she is what I like to call a right fighter. She gets in there and fights for what's right and tries to make positive change. She's passionate about it, and so we're grateful to have her on the show. Kayleigh, thank you for coming on the show with us. So welcome to Defending Our Children.
Thank you for having me on, and thank you for everything that you guys do. Seriously.
Well, it's a privilege to do what you think's right, and obviously you get that because your life, you're doing what you feel you've got to do. And if only more people would, this world would be a better place. So, tell
Absolutely.
us a little bit more about you and your story, and what got your feathers ruffled to cause you to decide that you were going to be part of the solution? Because so
Oh,
many people
gosh.
won't now, sadly.
Yeah. I mean, the road less traveled is hard to walk. And, awareness is only so much, but awareness without action is pointless. I mean, we can spread awareness all day long, but unless we get in there and do the work, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I realized through my own story and my case. And unfortunately, I do fall into the category, and I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I didn't ask for that, I didn't want it. And it is part of my story. I was sexually abused by my soccer coach and my PE teacher, an individual, a man who was very charming, we'll say, so much so that even after I turned him in and he was, busted and admitted to everything, everyone still stood by his side. And that's something a lot of victims deal with, whether it's childhood sexual assault, adult rape, or even sex trafficking. We're just in this world where there's this sense of urgency to stand with these bad guys. And victims are always having to fight. It doesn't matter how much proof they have. It doesn't matter how much time has gone by. We're just in this role of always having to fight and prove ourselves and what happened to us. And so my parents accepted a plea deal on behalf of me when I was 14 years old. This man was facing 25 years in jail or prison. He served 6 months in jail and 2 terms of lifetime probation. And my parents thought that he would be on probation forever. Long story short, in 2020, I was notified that because he's been good and completed his treatment, he was eligible to have his probation lifted. And when I asked what protection was available to me, I was told none. There was no such thing as protection that comes post probation. And I was not okay with that because I've already endured enough. Victims, they endure enough. And the last thing they should ever have to worry about is that their perpetrator can have access to them with no consequences. So I got to work and I drafted policy. One of the things I like to let people know is that I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know anything about policy. I didn't know anything about politics. I just knew that this had to change. And I was determined to make it happen, whatever that looked like. And so we drafted policy and created Kayleigh's law, and we can dive into that and obviously what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you what we were put through to get justice in our daughter's case was unacceptable. And there is so much room for improvement. So I celebrate those who are champions for children like you, who fight through the system and work to make it better. Because, man, in our case, just as an example, our daughter was made to testify or be cross-examined by her rapist, who had a knife to her throat the entire night where he was doing all these sick things to her, right? Horrifically traumatized her. He fired 14 public defenders, and each time was allowed to delay the case further taking away the hope of our daughter and starving her for justice. And I think this is systemic. Anybody that's going, I'm going to say this, anybody that's going soft on predators is going hard on the victims.
Absolutely.
It's not
Absolutely.
merciful. It's not merciful or kind to go soft on a serial murderer or rapist. There's nothing good about that. It is unjust to do it. It is wrong to do it. There's a certain amount of penalty and punishment that is appropriate for people that conduct these crimes as a deterrent and to get them off the street, to stop them from doing it for however many decades is appropriate. But
Absolutely.
what we have right now is an unleashing of the lions, and let them feed upon the little lambs out there, and somehow pretend that it's compassionate. It's brutal. It's anything other than compassion. I say it's straight from the pit of hell. It's an inverted reality, and I would say that it's even an attack on our nation, because
Absolutely.
the catastrophic results speak for themselves, and there's no defending it. If you run the math on it, just as a logic sequence, it doesn't work. So, yeah, please do go ahead and let us know a little bit more about Kayleigh's Law, how it all came about, because this is important how-to information.
Yeah. So I didn't I didn't even know it wasn't a thing. Nobody really knew. Even the judge herself said they never considered that there was no such thing as post probation protection. And I think when you hear the term lifetime, you assume that's what it is, right? It's like lifetime means lifetime. Well, I can only speak specific to Arizona for this. There is no definition for lifetime. There is no lifetime term, and therefore it's open ended. And that might not make sense to people, but in politics and within the law, that's exactly what it means. So in Arizona specifically, sex offenders can petition to get off their so-called lifetime probation as early as 7 years. Where's the justice in that? And then they're not even being transparent with the victims and their families and telling them that, yeah, this is a lifetime sentence, but really it's only 7 years. I have a huge problem with that. And so after, like I said, I spearheaded policy and we drafted Kayleigh's Law. And Kayleigh's Law provides victims of sexual and domestic abuse natural life protection from their abuser. We had to include natural because if we did not, lifetime would have no definition. And my
Wow.
God, when we added natural to it, we drafted it in 2021. It passed with complete bipartisan support, which was amazing, and was signed into law in 4 months later by Governor Ducey. But we quickly learned that our language was too loose because we didn't know. We created a new law. And so we didn't invest much more time in it for the 2021 legislative session. 2022, we drafted with natural in front of lifetime, and people came out of the woodworks fighting because a natural lifetime, a sentence that's a natural lifetime is unfair, and they don't deserve that. Yeah, no, victims absolutely deserve natural life protection.
Yeah.
If you were to go in your journey here and you asked 100 people what the word lifetime meant to them, was it pretty clear? Were their answers pretty clear that they meant from the span of from birth to death?
101 people were clear on that. Yes.
So this is what I get so frustrated with legislation. I know you're very familiar with this frustration, is the fact that you have a word that we use in everyday terms and everybody knows what it means, except for when you apply it in the law. And I find this to be abhorrent that we allowed our lawmakers to do this. It's ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous.
Yeah, well, the Bar Association needs to tackle that, and thou shalt not use deceitful language in any law.
Yes.
It really just has to be cleaned up. That's a perfect example of something that should be absolutely a no-go, a non-starter.
Absolutely. And so I went down to the Capitol. I've gotten braver every session. Now I just go full savage. And because through championing Kayleigh's Law and advocating for it and fighting so hard for it, because I'm living this. Like, yes, what happened to me happened years ago, but this is my reality and I'm living this. And the man who sexually abused me as a child should never have access to me without consequences. And so through the process, I have learned and found so many loopholes within the law that are beneficial to these predators and these sex offenders that I have just started drafting policy. I cannot tell you how much policy I've drafted. And I am so tight and specific.
Let's get into that on the other side of this break, folks. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more from Kayleigh Kozak. Sorry. Welcome back, everyone, to Defending Our Children. We're just about to hear more from Kayleigh Kozak on Kayleigh's Law. Kayleigh, go ahead and let fly. Let everybody know what they need to hear.
So when I started with Kayleigh's Law and I learned about the importance of the specific language used within a bill, I started drafting other policy for loopholes that we found existed in the law, most notably, specifically for sex offenders.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if the laws are created with loopholes in them, the intention of having these loopholes there for these sex offenders. And so as I've discovered these loopholes, I've drafted policy with specific legislators that realize these loopholes exist. And our language is so tight. And we actually attach to the language within the bill, like the consequences for if this law is broken. Because if you don't have that tied in, it's simply a recommendation. And so I've drafted this last session in Arizona. I spearheaded 4 bills specifically for holding the system and sex offenders and pedophiles accountable.
Right on. Well, one of the things that we've run into is judges and DAs that won't enforce the law. So this sounds like such a needed piece of legislation, and I'm glad to hear that it's gotten passed. What are your observations or understanding or even concerns of how it will be enforced? Any?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest problems we have right now is that prosecutors and judges, they have so much leniency, right? So like when these cases, most of them aren't even going to trial anymore. We know that they're letting these offenders plea down. And so they're not even taking into consideration what they were actually charged with, versus what they were convicted of. And I have a huge problem with that. But for example, with Kayleigh's law, specifically in Arizona, in this last legislative session, we had to, because we created a new law, we're tightening the language and we're learning. We had to draft a bill this session that would forbid a judge to seal or set aside a natural life injunction. Like that's where we're at with creating these bills and these laws, is we're having to include that, because if we don't, then they have the authority to do things such as seal or set aside a natural life injunction and strip the victim of that protection.
Wow. It seems like our society is just growing so, I hate to say sick, but when you don't protect your little ones, when you don't protect your victims, what other term can be put on it? It's not healthy to fail to protect the vulnerable and the defenseless from the predators. So it's unsettling. I guess the good news is there's a lot of need for us all to do some good. And you're able to bring legislation and force some hands to do the right thing. And that's a good thing in a concerning time, right? It's like when there's so much need to bring positive solutions, the opportunity is wide open. And that's a good thing, because so many people ask us, Craig, how can we help? Well, there's a lot that needs to be done. The good news is there's a lot to do. So there's a lot.
Yes.
To help.
And I think that, this is not a 1-lane highway. This is a 1,000,000-lane highway. And everyone can stay in a lane, and it's just equally as important, right? Like, we see after Sound of Freedom, you hear people, I want to get on a boat and go overseas and rescue kids. Like, that's probably not the best idea. God has chosen specific people, to do things like that. So find where you fit in, and you can be impactful and be part of the change. I have found for me, it's policy. I am very, very good at policy and being the front line of that and creating it and then going down to the Capitol and speaking on behalf of it. And that's my niche. And every part is so important, but people can get involved in so many different ways. And I wish that they would really step into that you don't have to go to the extreme to be in this battle and be fighting for fixing the problems that we have. Every part is so important.
That is a great point. We receive on a daily basis people that want to, what I call door kickers. And I tell them, for every door kicker that we have, we've got 10 people doing logistical support. And exactly. The logistical support, realistically, running an operation, for example, is a very small window of what we do. Spreading the message, reaching out, educating people is a huge thing, but there's a lot of support that has to be done with that. And on a separate note, one thing that you can do, why is it that so many people try to avoid going to jury duty? I think if you go and sit on a jury, whatever it is, and then you'll realize how screwed up our system is, and then we need to do something about it, because this erosion started whenever lawyer or attorney or or judges were going outside of like a sentencing range. If you've got 5 to 10, well, why are they getting 2? And so that to me was the beginning of the erosion. I recognized this many years ago when I was a young man. Like, why do we have these numbers if they don't mean what they mean?
Absolutely.
Here's something I want to
Absolutely.
ask you. When you talk about going to the Capitol building, you talk about the national Capitol in Washington, D.C., or the Arizona Capitol, Phoenix?
The Arizona State
Okay.
Capitol.
Is there, in fact, now a fence around the Capitol building? Now, let me just say something about that. When I was in the Federal Air Marshal Service, we had a corrupt official from the top of the FBI come and he was put in charge of our field office, even though he was not trained or qualified to be an air marshal. It was a good old boy deal by another corrupt guy who was the director of the Air Marshal Service, because the Secret Service had ejected him after 9/11, and he replaced his predecessor, who had been fired, who was also from the Secret Service, for spending $500,000 decorating his office after 9/11. So these were corrupt individuals from within our federal law enforcement system. The guy that took over our field office wanted our agents, who had the highest pistol qualification standards of any law enforcement anywhere, experts with pistols to a degree that no one else was forced to qualify at. He wanted them to unload their pistols inside the field office whenever they came in, even just to do a 15-minute travel claim or something like that. Wow. Which, considering the layout of the office, was an entirely illogical sequence of events. And it was more dangerous than them leaving the pistols in their holsters and concealed where they were. So everybody had great concern about it. It turned out to where this guy was corrupt, and he was keeping illegal dirt files on his own agents, not because they were doing anything wrong, but because he was compiling falsified accusations that he would later use to ruin their careers. And he knew that if they found out what he was doing to them, they'd probably be a little heated about it. And he was concerned for his own safety. Now, none of the agents were waiting for on any of it, except for that he was a weird and hostile dude who was not friendly to him and very critical. But you superimpose that over what happened in D.C. with our elected officials hiding behind razor wire fences for the first time in U.S. history. And now the Arizona Capitol, they've erected this fence. Why are they hiding behind fences? What's happened? Nothing's changed with we the people. So I guarantee you, anytime you see elected officials hiding in desperation and fear, if they are terrorized of law-abiding American citizens, it's because they're betraying us and lying to us in a way that they knew that if we learned what they were doing, they would have concerns for their own safety. And that's just been my observation watching the federal government from the inside. And I'll let you speak to that before we cut to another break.
Yeah, I mean, to follow that is these people have forgotten that our elected officials work for us, we the people. Somewhere along the line, that has been just very forgotten as just a society and with the people that are in these elected positions.
Yeah, it's sad, but we need to recognize the dynamic. And that's why I drug you guys through that story, so you would recognize, hey, where's this fear coming from? Because that's not natural. The Capitol is supposed to be the people's house. We built it. We own it. We run it. We have elected officials that represent us as long as we allow them to. And when they don't, we remove them and replace them with someone else who will. So why are they hiding in terror and fear and barricading themselves in there as though they're our enemy? Something to contemplate, folks. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, everybody, to Defending Our Children. We are on with Kayleigh Kozak. Man, we're talking about Kayleigh's Law. We're talking about victims' rights. We're talking about elected officials and their representation of we the people. It's a good discussion so far. Where do you think we need to take this next, Kayleigh, from your perspective?
Policy. I think we need across the nation, we need to draft more policy, as mentioned, hold the system and these sex offenders accountable. And that's my mission, and to get Kayleigh's Law passed across the nation, because Arizona was the first state in the nation to pass a law such as this that gives victims natural life protection from their abuser, which is so crazy to me. Wisconsin was the second state. They passed Kayleigh's Law in 2022. We did draft in a few states this last legislative session. Unfortunately, it just didn't go anywhere because they were drafted so late in the session. But next session, we have drafted in several states, or we are drafting in several states. So I'm eager and excited about that. But 2 states is not enough. We have an entire nation to protect. And so that is my number one mission, and my goal is to get Kayleigh's Law passed across the nation.
Well, we celebrate that, and we're proud of you for it and congratulate you on it. Let's unpack a little bit of how to, for those out there that, man, they may say, hey, Craig, I've never stroked any legislation. I've never helped draft any laws, any bills, any proposals. How do we get groups together? What are the best references? Kind of what's the process, the mechanics of getting something like this done? What are the tips?
Well, I think first, as I mentioned in the last segment, is remember that these people work for you. They owe you their time. Their job is to listen to you, and you have to remind them of that and then demand that you get that time, whatever that looks like. It's different in every state getting involved with politics and legislation. So here in Arizona, you can get involved just you can put your opinion or your views just on their website. You can show up and speak. But I think regardless of what state you're in and what the process is, showing and being present and speaking on behalf of these bills is so critical, because when these legislators get your emails, which are great, it's just a piece of paper and it's just an email. If you show up and you're standing in front of them, you're now a real person. You're real, and they can't ignore that. They can't run from that. And then when you're there, you're also able to hold them accountable. And that's also another big thing that we need to remember, is that we need to be holding these elected officials accountable for their actions and where they're standing and their position on these issues.
Well, history demonstrates when the politicians are concerned about the citizens, it's a lot more healthy environment than when the citizens are concerned about their elected officials. That's the healthier dynamic. Like you said, they work for us, and we just need to assert ourselves in that way. So, Kayleigh, I take it you're saying that it won't just be okay if our bandwidth is full and we're a little stressed and we're a little busy and we're all maxed out with our own lives and we just don't show up or participate in the political process. Will it not just kind of work itself out and for the best, and we'll all be okay?
Oh, if only we could snap our fingers and have that be. Listen, everyone is busy, and I understand. I have 5 kids. I get it, and all this work I do for free. I don't get paid for any of this. I'm doing this because first of all, I feel like God has called me. And second of all, because if I don't do it, who will? And showing up and being there, we have to be on the front line and fighting for these things. And we have to be consistent with fighting for these things.
Well, look, I'm not a cheerleader, but I want to pause for a quick cheer on this. And if you can picture me jumping up and down with pom-poms. Okay, 5 children, still getting all this done. Folks, if you have any less than 5 children, you have no excuse, because Kayleigh's bringing it. When God tells you to do something, you don't hesitate, right? So God's called her and she's obeying. What a beautiful and powerful thing that is, to have the Almighty behind you. If you have a calling, you better get to it. And if you don't have a calling, maybe ask for one, because maybe he's got an idea.
Yeah. And listen, it's not easy for me. It is re-traumatizing. It's hard for me to go down and relive my story. And I am more than a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, but that's where I'm able, and I'm living out these things. But this is where I will be so transparent. I get so angry with God sometimes. I'm like, why do you keep pulling me into these dark places? And then I'm telling you, it's almost like I'm blinded sometimes, whether it's another car and their brights are on, or the sun hits me a certain way. And he's like, I'm calling you to shed light into these dark places. And every time I go down to the Capitol, I am always outnumbered by sex offenders themselves, their mommies, not judges, lawyers, all these people. They are down there, and I am literally, the odds are stacked against me every single time. But I can have so much peace and be so calm because God has brought me to that place. And I have never walked out of there with my head not held high and not have winning, for lack of a better words, like the opposing side loses, because I am able to speak truth and be so confident in what I'm fighting for that I walk out of there with them voting yes for what I'm presenting and not choosing the other side that's outnumbering me immensely.
Well, that's what a warrior really is. Someone has the moral courage to stand up and do what's right, even when it's not easy or convenient. And that is so much of what's missing in our culture right now. So I celebrate that. It's tremendous. We need more of it. And you seem to be doing a really fine job of it. So thank you for everything you're giving.
Kayleigh, I think the reason that he's giving you these messages and you ask him why, and I get angry with him and I give him a piece of my mind, is he knows you have to walk into the lion's den. He's preparing you as a warrior. You are a warrior. You have to walk into the lion's den. You're surrounded by the enemy, but you're doing a mission that was assigned to you. So when I was thinking of David, and that's what we right now, I'm reading Psalms. I'm trying to understand his journey because we are walking into the lion's den. So I certainly praise you for your efforts there.
Yeah, that's the way he builds up his warriors. It's just like Navy SEAL training. It's tough. And we could either fuss about it being tough or be grateful, realizing we're getting made into the hardest warriors that ever walked the face of the planet, and realize there's a reason for it. And in our organization and mission, man, we've been put under the hammer quite a bit, and increasingly lately, but we can feel that he's strengthening us and he's bringing other opportunities, and it's building up towards something. So even though it's painful, it's a growth spurt. So obviously he loves you, or he wouldn't elevate you into such a position of right fighter warriorhood where you can shine and look back and go, man, I'm glad I brought all that. It was tough, but look at what I've accomplished,
And I think, I often think about David, and if you don't feel like David in your battle, it's not big enough. If you do feel like David, then you're in the right battle, right? Because that's how you know when you poke the bear and you're going in with all odds stacked against you, like that is God calling you to do it. And you have to trust that he's called you there for a reason, that he will protect you. And so many things along my journey have happened that make absolutely no sense. And then I sit there and I'm like, okay, God, like you are the only thing that makes sense, because what just happened makes absolutely no sense in a good way. Yeah. So, and no, it's not easy, and it's, I always, of course I'm nervous and I feel fear and it sucks. Like, I'm not going to lie, but this is where God has called me, and I will continue to pursue where he leads.
Well, we're so glad he has, and that you do. Let everybody know real quickly before we have to sign off how to find you and support what you do.
So my website is becauseyoustillmatter.com. And that's why I'm fighting so hard, is because you still matter. And I will not stop. I'm also, my biggest platform is probably Instagram. I share a lot. It's the Kayleigh Kozak. But there's a lot of what I do and information on my website, becauseyoustillmatter.com.
Kayleigh, thank you so much. We're going to do another segment with you. Folks, stay tuned if you can. For the rest of you, join us next time on Defending Our Children. Welcome, everyone, to Defending Our Children. This will be the second half of our show with Kayleigh Kozak. She is a right fighter. She is a champion for children, and she is instrumental in bringing about Kayleigh's Law, and it defends the victims of sexual assaults. So we celebrate her. Kayleigh, thank you for coming on the show. Welcome to the second half of the show. And something I'd like to talk about is these people who oppose you in the legislative process. Doesn't it seem like it might be beneficial to them, because you're not stopping? You're tenacious, like a Rottweiler on a bone. You're not going to go away. It seems to be at some point, maybe it'd be more beneficial for them, even more convenient for them, to work with you and allow you to protect victims rather than continue fighting you indefinitely so that they can protect the predators like they're doing now. What do you think of all that?
Well, I think that's shooting for the stars, and it's not going to happen. So what can happen, and that's not backing down. Did you guys happen to see what happened with me and the governor of Arizona?
I did not.
Send it. Bring it with us. Let's hear it.
Oh,
was it you following her in the hallway talking to her?
Oh no, 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 no. Oh no, I wouldn't. Are you kidding me? That would require my effort that she doesn't deserve. No, she's
Okay.
not worthy of that. No. So I had drafted bills this last legislative session in Arizona. One of them was specific to having a registered sex offender with parental rights that they must notify their children's school of their status. That's a whole thing. But no, they do not have to notify their school. In Arizona, only level 2 and level 3 have to notify the school in the district which they live. So closing a loophole. So in January, I was asked by Maricopa County Attorney's Office to be a keynote speaker for National Victims of Crime Rights Week and receive a national award. Well, like I had mentioned in the first first part of the show, I went full savage down at the Capitol this session. I did not hold back. I brought everything to light. And so I think looking back, I think that kind of scared them. They viewed me as a loose cannon, if you will, even though all I was doing was speaking truth and shining light into the dark places and exposing the loopholes that exist. So it went through, it passed with partisan support, of course. I'm like, this should be a bipartisan issue, but okay, you've now exposed where you stand. And the bill went to the governor and she vetoed it, saying that there was already laws in place. I never get on Twitter. I got on Twitter and I tweeted a picture that said Arizona's governor prioritizes protecting pedophiles over innocent children in schools, and that I was disgusted. 3 days later, I got a phone call telling me that I was no longer invited to this event and my reward had been revoked because I spoke out against elected officials, and that they could not have me share the stage with officials that I've been openly critical of. And they revoked everything.
Wow.
And that just like, no, I'm not going anywhere. Like, so I said, okay, well, if this is how it's going to be and this is what we're going to do, you may have first of all, you just exposed yourselves for how
Yep.
you actually treat victims in the state of Arizona. Second of all, if you're going to strip me of this opportunity to share my story on stage at this event for all the work that I have done to protect victims of sex crimes and children, that's fine. But you're not just going to get away with that. So we held a live press conference on the same day at the same time as the event, calling out all these officials and what they have done. So they stripped me of that opportunity, but they also gave me the platform to elevate my voice on another stage. And they showed themselves and exposed who they really are and where they really stand. So they can continue to do things like that. That's fine. But I'm not going anywhere. And we can work together, and they can work with me or they can work against me. I'm not going anywhere. And with that, I am not suicidal.
With that strategy that they're doing, it's very apparent. Our elected officials, they should invite you to debate them over something. And frankly, I don't think she's qualified to determine whether or not the laws that were in place were good enough. I think that she was told what to do and she did it. But if you have that much disdain for somebody that you feel like a threat, you should bring them on stage with you as an elected official, so you can show the public if that person is an idiot, you can reveal that they're idiot. But if they are truly an adversary, then you can have the debate amongst the folks that need to see this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll challenge it. I had another bill that was putting a minimum time served on this so-called lifetime probation. And I wasn't satisfied with it. But I have my own personal lane, and then I have the realistic lane, and we have to start somewhere, right? So this was starting 10 years minimum time served on a class 4, 5, 6 felony before you could petition to get off probation. 20 years served on a class 2, 3 felony before you could petition to get off probation. County attorney told me she didn't agree with that, which I struggle with. And this was if you were convicted of a lifetime sentence. And she said she didn't agree with that. She thought there were better ways. And I said, well, I guess I'll see you on the Capitol floor. I'll debate you all day long. I don't care if you're the county attorney. I stand firm in what I'm bringing to the table, and I will back it till the death. Your title doesn't scare me or intimidate me. These are the things that are happening. These are the policies that need to be put in place. And these are the loopholes that we are trying to close. So if you want to stand on the side of saying, I don't agree with this, I think there's better ways, and I'm not for a minimum time served on a lifetime sentence, so be it. I'll see you there. They didn't come, of course, but I'll challenge. I don't care. I'm very firm and confident in the things that I'm presenting.
Well, the corrupt do not like to be challenged. They do not like to face the people, or especially champions for the people and champions for the children, right fighters. They don't like answering for their behavior, because in the cases where they're paid off, or they're not acting in good faith, they're very insecure about that. They don't like facing it. That's why they won't debate you. That's why they won't want to talk about it in public. They want to hide behind razor wire fences and do it in private and collect their kickbacks and not face the people for their behavior. They don't like to be accountable. And that's why we, the citizenry, have to get more assertive in making sure we just overwhelming flood in our ballots and make sure we get them out of their positions, whether they're judges or DAs or attorneys general or any other elected officials, congressmen, senators. Forrest?
So for anybody that just tuned in, I want to repeat what Kayleigh is focusing on, and that is, if you are a victim of sexual crime and that your assailant gets convicted, you want a lifetime ban after they get out of jail. You want or prison, a lifetime ban for them to approach you, talk to you, write you, email you, have any sort of contact with you. And as a survivor, you want to be able to have that choice to protect you until you're gone from this earth. Am I clear on that? It's nuts to think that this isn't. I mean, it seems very.
That it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I know.
It's like, hey, the guy's getting out of jail, and therefore I don't want him to ever. I don't want to ever see him again. That to me seems normal. It seems natural that the survivor would want that.
Yes, and in the bill and the law itself, but prior to the law, Kayleigh's law, the crime itself was not adequate enough to get protection. You had to prove you were in current danger. And I was like, I can't, I cannot, this doesn't set well with me. And that's why I champion Kayleigh's law.
Well, we're learning, and I appreciate you sharing your journey and your battles, because it lets everybody else know kind of what they're up against, why things aren't working correctly, why there's so much crime and not enough justice. I'd like to say the American people are starved for justice, because in crimes that we can witness from all over the country, we see no SWAT team takedown, no handcuffs, no arrests, no prosecutions, and it's demoralizing. And I believe that at the highest level, it's meant to be demoralizing. But go ahead.
Oh, to say we have an accountability problem. That's what we have.
That's what
there is. A huge accountability problem.
Folks, let's talk about that on the other side of this break. We'll be right back with more from Kayleigh Kozak. Welcome back, everyone, to Defending Our Children. We are just cracking open the conversation about accountability. My, don't we need it? Kayleigh, what's it like for you seeing those that are not held to account the way that they should be in the system, the way that it's advertised to be?
It's so frustrating. But we have an accountability problem, but we also have a bravery problem, because the people who know that these people need to be held accountable aren't brave enough to stand up and actually hold them accountable. So we don't have a lot of frontliners right now that are willing to hold these people accountable, because they don't want the backlash, or they don't feel like their voice is adequate enough to call these people out when it is. I am very big on accountability, and down at the Arizona State Capitol, sometimes it's kind of funny. I had a county attorney approach me and say, I really want to talk to you about a bill. And he was like kind of frantic. And he said, I'm not opposed to it. I just want to tweak the language. He explained to me why. He's like, but please don't blast me on Instagram. I want to have a conversation. And I laughed and I said, first of all, that's not my bill, but I'm honored that you thought that I was the spearhead behind that. Second of all, I won't blast you on Instagram unless you literally go up against what this stands for. And he just wanted a language tweak, and that's fine. We need to be having those conversations. But down at the legislature, specifically in Arizona, all the people that go against the bills I'm drafting, I will let everyone know who you are and why you went against it. Or I don't even know why most of the time. So they know where you stand. And if you're confident in your choices, that accountability shouldn't faze you. But they're not, because they want to hide behind it. So they don't like the being exposed and the being held accountable for where they stand on an issue. They want to hide behind the issue and behind their whatever it is they voted for. And just like the governor and the AG and everything that happened with taking me out of that that event and forbidding me to even attend. There needs to
Oh,
be
wow.
accountability with that. You are going to be held accountable for the choices you made for forbidding a victim and revoking an award for speaking in disagreement and out against you. And that's
Bully
what we did.
tactics. Bully tactics.
Yeah.
That's ugly. That's ugly. Well, look, what I see in your discussion is two sides of a moral issue. Those who are on the shameful side, they are ashamed of their behavior, or at least they know that the rest of the public would be ashamed of their behavior, so they don't want to be accountable for it. And those of us who are on the side of right, we must demonstrate and exercise more moral courage. Well, where does courage come from? Well, I believe it comes in faith. Whose are you? And the Bible says faith comes from hearing, and hearing the word of God, which means when you read the word of your creator, the Holy Bible, and this isn't even a religious thing, it's about knowing your creator and understanding who you are and what you're about. Read the word, understand how everything works, who you are, what you're supposed to do. You have that faith and you walk in that power and confidence. And you apparently you rattle and scare people when you're tuned in like that and acting in good faith for that which is righteous, which is morally correct. And so the other people can't face you. They're on the shameful side, so they run and hide and resort to bully tactics. And it should be very, very clear to us who's who in this confrontation, folks.
And in this category of fighting for children and protecting children from predators and from individuals who choose to harm children, there is no mistakes here. These predators are making conscious choices to harm children. They are going to great extents and lengths to harm children. There is no there is no gray. This is black and white. You're either protecting the predator or you're protecting the children. There is no in between here. And so when they try to play it as, well, this maybe they made a mistake. No, you're either on the side of protecting children or you're on the side of protecting the perpetrator. That's it.
Well, I think if a lot more of these elected officials and those in the judicial system had children who were traumatized or spouses who were traumatized or had been traumatized themselves or were even properly educated on those who have been, they would be more compassionate and recognize the harm and not protecting those victims. Because if you've ever been around somebody that's been assaulted and rattled and traumatized and concerned about their safety, you would understand. So my question is, why don't these people understand? Why aren't these people understanding, Kayleigh, who are confronting, combating you and hiding from you behind razor wire fences?
I'm gonna go against you a little bit. They fully understand. It's who's filling their pockets. They are not. I had a Democrat come up to me and say, I am with you. I support you. I believe in everything that you're doing. I cannot go against my party line. And I know that in Arizona, the Republicans hold the House and the Senate. So they know, the Democrats know they can all vote no on something and the Republicans can carry it. And he said, I cannot speak out and go against my party line. So he was not brave enough to stand up against his party line. They know, they're aware. And actually, even in one of my last bills that went before the floor, to put an offender that has a dangerous crime against a child on the DPS public registry because they are not in Arizona. That's a whole other story. I had all three Democrats on the Judiciary Committee say in the committee, you can go look this up, that they are in favor of this and they support this, but they have to vote no because they are not willing to go against their party line. So I do believe that they are fully aware. I do believe they understand. And I do believe that a lot of them are actually personally affected, whether it be personally or a child or a family member. It's who's filling their pockets and they're not going to go against their party line.
I have 2 points on that. First of all, Kayleigh, they're there to represent the people, not the party. And number two, I truly believe after what I've learned and what I'm currently learning, that if you look at the child trafficking aspect, that's the currency of what makes the world go around. And there's 4 positions as a policymaker that you are living in. Either you're ignoring it, you are benefiting from it, you're participating, or you're leveraged. Okay. Those are the things that make, whenever somebody says, I'm going to do the opposite of what is logical, Okay. And like you said, this is a black and white issue because I can tell you, I've never met a survivor that says, I really enjoyed that. I'm glad that happened to me. You never will, you never have. And so when you look at something so black and white, they've got to be, in my belief, one of those four positions of ignoring it, which is very unlikely today, participating, benefiting, or being leveraged.
Yeah, I love that. And look at what just happened in California with SB 14 and making the sex trafficking of a minor a felony. And you had those 6 elected officials that voted no. Why?
Was that the one that was pushed by Shannon Grove?
Yes.
Yes, she wrote that. Yes, we had her on a while back.
Yes. And I've spoken with her about drafting Kayleigh's law in California. So, and she is one of the few champions in California that's fighting for these things. And talk about David and Goliath situation. she is a David in California for the things that she's championing there.
Indeed.
Yeah, that state's definitely struggling. You know, I probably have 40 friends that used to be in the film and television industry who have fled and they're refugees, quality people. They've gone to better states under this gross mismanagement of California in the last 2 years.
But look at how people stepped up and spoke out against those 6 elected officials and held them accountable. And then within 24 hours, the bill was back in, and now it's going through committees. It has not been passed or signed. A lot of people don't understand the legislative process, but there was accountability for the people. I made a video on it and put their faces and who they were, because people should know who these people are. And that takes courage to share those. I mean, for me, it's easy because I want people to know who they are. But there was accountability there. And so as we get bolder with holding these people accountable, I do believe we will start to see a shift.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, accountability matters because sunshine is the best antiseptic for corruption. So that's what we got to bring. You got to shine the light on this despicable or dishonorable behavior whenever we see it so that we can clean it up. There's a lot of swamp to drain, not just in DC, but in our hometowns. So let's get at it. We'll be right back with more from Kayleigh Kozak after this quick break. Welcome back to Defending Our Children, everyone. This is our last segment with Kayleigh Kozak. Man, she's a fighter. I encourage you guys to find her, support who she is and what she does. We need more people out there like this fighting, because she's running into so many elected officials that just don't care about the victims unless they can personally benefit financially or with their political career. She's finding that they can't really be made to care about the victims. So it's discouraging on one hand, but on the other hand, it's very, very encouraging, because look at this right fighter that she is. Look at the moral courage that she exhibits and demonstrates when she takes action every day, and how many others may really benefit from that lifestyle of just saying, wait a minute, I can do something too. And then taking that first step and realizing it feels really good. And it's what we're supposed to do, is be part of the solution. And then a little might turn into a little bit more. And you might feel just on top of the world at some point by fighting for those that deserve it and doing what you know in your heart is right and help making this world a better place. So, Kayleigh, what have you to say about all this?
I think whether it be elected officials feeling like they don't care, or just in general, I think that's something that victims and survivors deal with on a daily basis, is feeling like alone and like people don't care and like it doesn't matter. And when I started this whole journey, I wasn't sure what avenue I was going down, and I wasn't sure what would come of it. And something I kept saying to myself throughout the process was, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I putting myself through this? Why am I living this still every single day? Why am I fighting so hard? And I kept coming back to, because you still matter, because you still matter. That's why I fight so hard, is because you still matter. And so I think as victims are going on with their lives, it never goes away. It doesn't, I think victims they more so have a body reaction to things that's involuntary. They don't even recognize what's happening because of what happened to them in their past. It's subconscious. It's not a mental thing. It might not even cross their mind, but they have a body reaction, right? And so they may not understand why they're feeling that way. but they know that they're feeling that way, and that whether it's they feel alone or discouraged or all those types of things. And so even myself, who is on the front line fighting so hard, very confident in what I'm doing, listening to God, I still feel alone sometimes. I still feel discouraged. I still feel like I'm screaming at the mountaintops, and I feel like I'm not getting anywhere some days. And it's not that I'm not, but that's how I feel. And so I think it's really important for victims and survivors to know and see that there are people that are actively fighting for them in all areas of this, whether it's, whether it's the detectives and the therapists that are there when you turn someone in, or the victims advocates that are there in court, or someone who's there 10 years later that's there to support you. Victims and survivors need to know that there are people that are actively fighting for them, and that they do care, and it gives them hope, and they need that hope to hold on to. And so as we go through this nasty, just evil, dark place of what's happening, for victims and survivors to see that there is light is so important.
Whenever I talk to somebody that's really down for whatever reason, life's kind of loaded up on them with a few rapid succession blows, and they're like, man, so I'm feeling, this way or that way. I encourage them to get out and find someone to help, find something positive to do, because you kind of can't swing a stick without hitting somebody that's got it worse off than you. If you bother to look, and helping them, and even the smallest of ways, is a positive step, and it helps break that stalemate of self-focus. And there's so much that needs to be done. There's so much opportunity to do good in this world. And I think what Kayleigh's doing is giving us a demonstration of what that can be, what that can look like. And find your mark, find your niche, find what it is that you're really passionate about, what would make you feel better about bringing positive change through. And then study, research, and craft your plan and execute. Go and start doing it, and even start small, baby steps. But man, even if it's holding a door open for a pregnant woman, my gosh, I see people now, they're like zombies. They'll walk and they'll drop a spring-loaded door in the face of a pregnant woman with a stroller, and she's struggling, and they don't even look to see. And I'm like, come on, folks, get out of your own self, out of your own turmoil, your own maxed out bandwidth, and do a scan around and see who you can help, and see what you can get involved with to start changing things like Kayleigh's doing. And you'd be amazed at what a boost that is. And it leads
it's empowering.
Yes, that it is. It's confirming, and it's empowering, and it leads to a higher path, man. And it's just better.
And I think to victims, well, I know victims are often forgotten about. Their later trauma that surfaces it's so undermined. And then you have the perpetrators, the bad guys, the ones who committed these crimes and caused these things. And they have endless resources at their fingertips. They are followed. They're just, everything is there, and victims are just expected to just move on. And that later trauma resurfaces. Victims wonder why they feel so affected, and it's because they feel alone, and they feel like they don't have anything. And I can't think of them off the top of my head, but like there's if you're a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, there's like 5 stages of your life that can like deeply impact and affect you. And I will say I made it through all 4 with no problem. But when my oldest daughter turned the age that I was when I was abused, it was debilitating to me, because I'm looking at my 13-year-old, she was, when she turned 12, thinking, why did this happen to me? What did he see? Like, it was a lot for me to take in, and it was a body reaction, right? Like my body was responding to the feelings that I was having, because it was perspective for me.
Sure.
And so that is something that happened because of what happened to me when I was younger. And so victims, they're just forgotten about, and they're just expected to move on and get over it. I hate that. Just get over it. It happened to you. Yeah, it did happen, but it still affects me.
I see a real void of education and understanding on trauma survivors. What deep psychological trauma does to people. folks, if you've ever known one, you would be compassionate and realize, man, there's some stuff to change, because we got people that are callous and ignorant and uneducated on this, and they're just steamrolling and ruining the lives of a lot of people. They're just not paying attention. There's so much room for improvement. So that's something I think is needed. We really need to start educating. It needs to be compulsory education. Here's what happens to somebody when they go through something horrific, especially at an early age, because it's something our entire society needs to comprehend so that we can be healthier from here forward.
I agree with you. I think part of the problem is, even, with Sound of Freedom coming out and people wanting to get involved in this topic, our brains are wired to protect us. So people have a hard time understanding this is real, because their brains want to protect them from the reality of these horrific things, but they're very, very real.
Yeah.
And trying to get people to actually comprehend what's going on and the severity of this is very difficult, because they either shut down because it happened to them, or they were affected in some way by something of this nature, or it makes them uncomfortable and they don't want to believe that it's real. And so they don't want to even engage in conversing about the topic and what happens after.
Well, it's too true. And I want to wrap it up by saying thank you again, and letting people, speaking of someone who engages, let people find and support someone who engages. So you let people know how to find and support you.
Thank you so much. So my website is becauseyoustillmatter.com. You can find all my work on there, legislation that I'm behind, my story, a little bit of my story. And then I'm also on social media. My name on almost everything is the Kayleigh Kozak. I share a lot on social media. But my website is a good place to find everything that I'm doing and my story.
Well, Kayleigh, thank you for coming on. God bless you. Keep up the great work. And for the rest of you, join us next time on Defending Our Children.